Thank you all for coming. It's a fairly varied group that you've attracted. So I have known Paul since 1991 in one way or another. Knew of him at Interleaf, I think, more than knew him, where he was brought in to be successfully, not surprisingly, the Lisp genius as Interleaf, the advanced word processing company, tried to become a Lisp-based advanced word processing company, which was tough.
More like Lisp iced.
I'm absolutely a groupie. Yeah. So if you don't know Paul, I'm not going to do a very good job of introducing you, but you might know him. You might know him as, I feel like I'm in the Simpsons thing. You might know him as a Lisp guy. You might know him as an entrepreneur. And as somebody who has started a really interesting, successful, and big-hearted, I don't know, a lab.
Y Combinator.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you'll do better at this than I am.
We call it a seed funding firm.
Yeah. So especially over summers, college students and others?
No, it's twice a year. There's 2 batches, twice a year. One in the summer and one in the winter. And the winter one takes place in California, through no coincidence.
And out of this have come noble experiments and some absolutely great sites and services. So, including Reddit, which was just bought by Condé Nast, by Condé Net, the net version of Condé Nast. So this is Condé Nast going meta itself. Taking a site that was taking content from lots of places, including there, and aggregating it and adding metadata to it, and now Condé Nast has in fact swallowed it itself. So
yeah,
it's an interesting story.
They bought back Wired too. Just before that, Yahoo and Google better watch out. The old media seem to be waking up a bit.
You may also know Paul as a brilliant essayist, just one of the best essayists working today. Really a wonderful stylist as well as thinker. And you probably also know that he is a serious and seriously trained painter. No?
Seriously trained. A serious painter would probably actually do it.
I've seen very little of your work, but it was really good.
Oddly enough. I'm surprised you ever saw any.
Yeah. So when we were talking about doing this, you suggested the, what's the name of it? Oh yeah,
Taste for Makers.
Taste for Makers, an essay that you wrote a couple years ago. Well,
2002 it says.
2002, more than a couple.
Yeah.
Like ancient.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about, and I want to ask you about it.
Okay.
That's okay.
Sounds good. I have a copy right here. If I have any questions, I can just look at it.
I'm sorry, you may not have an expert in the group with you.
I've heard now, like in exams, people can take reference.
One of the things that people who writers in general, I assume, don't spend a lot of time going back and rereading what they wrote 4 and 5 years ago.
So no, I bet some do. I bet that would be an interesting question. Actually, I go back and reread stuff a lot.
Okay, so are you up on this article?
Well, no. There's a lot going on at the moment. We're actually in the middle, or at the end of choosing the next batch of startups, and that is basically the way we operate is we take the way regular venture capital firms work and compress it all into 2 days, twice a year. So it's like this shocking crunch.
Can people in the back hear, by the way? Okay.
All right. I could talk louder if you want.
So I was going to do this as a multiple choice exam on the content, but I guess we're going to move to essays more.
However you want. However you want.
So this is an article that makes a case for the unity of important things like art, engineering, and science.
Yeah.
And says that there's something that all 3 of them keep coming back to that's the same, and we call this taste. We can call it beauty.
Beauty is sort of the ability to recognize. Sorry, taste is the ability to recognize beauty. Taste is radar.
Okay. And that the quality that they have, which we will now call beauty, um, is basically the same in all three, and there's something eternal, and it can't be a coincidence that all three of these things keep coming back to that.
Well,
So,
I don't
okay.
know if it's the same thing in all three, but how about this? There's not nothing there. Like when I was a kid, my father is, I guess, a physicist, and he believed this idea that like taste is subjective, right? A lot of people probably get that, and I believed it when I was a kid. Like everyone just likes what they like, you know, and no one can argue with anybody else. De gustibus non.
Disputandum est.
Yes. But I think what that really means is more like leave your guns at the door. It's more like if you dispute about taste, you'll never get anywhere.
Well, I think
Not
it's
that
actually
there's
the opposite.
nothing-
Okay, so I think what that about taste there is no argument is actually a definition of taste. It's that stuff about which there is no argument. So I like vanilla, you like chocolate. There's no real way to argue ourselves into this. We just do leave it at the door.
Mm. Well, I used to believe that, and then I realized that if it were true, people who are in the business of making good things, when they think they're getting better at it, they're just deluded. Everybody else can get better at their jobs, you know? Stock traders can get better at picking winners, and football players can get better at throwing the football. But designers, they can't get better at their jobs because, you know...
Because they're being evaluated on something that is considered to be merely a matter
Because
of
it's just made up, right?
subjectivity.
If beauty is just made up, then you can't get better at producing it, right? It just didn't feel, as somebody who made something, it felt like other kinds of work. It didn't feel like it was just imaginary that I was getting better at it, you know? So I thought, maybe my father was wrong.
Which assumes that
Not the first time I
the
thought that.
quality by which we judge the things that makers make. And we have a particular, I think, a particular set of makers in mind, but includes software engineers.
And Bronzino.
And Bronzino.
Right.
You're seeing in stereo.
Like,
so.
for example, you chose a very famous painting as an example here that everyone loves and probably agrees is really well done, right?
Good, yeah.
When things get old enough, you don't get into such arguments about taste anymore. People are pretty much willing to agree about, you know, ancient Greek pottery, which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones, right? Then it's okay to talk about beauty.
Why is it that as things get old?
I think because fashion is less of an influence, you know. Fashion is error.
But
Often deliberately promulgated.
What taste in old stuff is certainly goes through fashions.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
There
it's
are
true.
times
But
when
among
people hate the Romans, love the Greeks, hate the Baroque, they love Mozart and they hate Telemann, they love Ellington and they hate Mozart.
but there is a decrease in the amplitude. You start out with these oscillations that go like this, and then as time goes on, they sort of go like that, right?
And I'm not sure that's right, but let's for the moment say that it is. Okay, why does that happen?
I think because it's the same as with, well, Samuel Johnson said about writing that it took something like 200 years or 150 years to know what a writer's reputation ought to be, because you had to wait for all the famous people, all the influential people who liked the writer to die, and all their students to die, right? Until eventually, all you had was a bunch of people who had just found the book in a library, right, and just judged it for what it was, without thinking, you know, Samuel Johnson was a great guy, or Samuel Johnson did me a favor.
So this, I mean, heads towards one of the two big things that worry me in this piece, which is I'm really not convinced that when you and I look at this Bronzino or this whatever, I have some other examples, all of which you'll find, well, okay, bad examples.
Only the two you mentioned. Well, it's because they're bad examples of simplicity.
Exactly. That's why I chose them. These
No,
are
I
all
mean bad for your case.
Oh, in that case, I disavow them.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's get to that in a
Do you want me to
second.
explain why? Well, no, go ahead. Keep talking. I'll
Do I
explain
want
why
to
later.
Explain why. Yeah, sure.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Okay.
So let me. I'll just cycle through. This is. I'm sorry.
That is a better example.
Um,
You didn't mention that.
This is a Van Eyck.
Yes, I know.
So I did mention it. It's just not this particular one.
Huh.
Right. And I mentioned this as well. This is.
Yeah.
What this is not a great picture of is the amount of detail that's on here. There's a little bit more of, there's one of the freezes at the parking lot.
No, that doesn't count. That's bolted decoration.
It doesn't count because you don't want it to count.
No, it's not. It wasn't sort of thought of as part of the building. You know? It's like flames painted on the side of a car.
Right, so here's a column that you can still. But this is exactly what I'm finding troublesome.
All right, you were saying this was an example of
this
not
could
being
be
simple,
yes,
right?
this could be simpler.
It
And
could
if,
be
if
simpler.
simplicity is the good.
I didn't say simple. Things ought to be as simple as possible.
But then, exactly. So your concept of what constitutes simplicity is that which you find aesthetic. So of course.
No.
Okay.
No. There is actually something going on here. Let me give you an example. Fortunately, I had time to think about this because you
damn, I got
posted
some other
something about
examples.
this on your blog, right? If you had to compress this, like if you had to make an AutoCAD program that would generate it, I was over at Robert Morris's house this afternoon. It's his birthday. Robert Morris is 41 today, and he has a mansard-roofed Victorian house. And basically, if you had to compress a description of the front door of Robert Morris's house, it would compress larger than the description of this building, right? You have round columns with flutes that go around, right? Repeat, chunk, chunk, chunk. Column, repeat, chunk, chunk, chunk. Right? I mean, this is actually extremely simple.
Yeah.
In the sense of what it would take to compress it.
So I had at one point, but I don't have now. It doesn't matter.
Like one figure in the frieze would probably compress to larger than the entire building. That is an interesting point, right?
Yes, it is.
You know,
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
So
that's actually about as simple as you can get. You know.
well, but it's really not.
The building is as simple.
No,
as
it's
you can
really
get.
not, because you could compress it further if it didn't have the damn flutes.
Ah,
and if
well,
it
you know
didn't
what
have
has the fluting?
And if it didn't
Do you know how
have
these things were
the
made?
curly Corinthian or Ionian, whatever the hell it is.
Those ain't Corinthian, dude.
All right, so
Any architects here will confirm that.
if it didn't have the doodad at the top.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't make it much simpler.
But you could
and
make it
remain
simpler.
functional. Yeah, you could make it simpler. I didn't say things have to be absolutely as simple
So,
as possible, and that's the only consideration.
Then in what sense?
It's like you just looked at the first thing listed here.
I know you're not
12 of
saying.
them.
I know you're not saying that the
All right, I'll tell you what I
simplicity
mean.
is the only criterion.
It's actually good that you made me think about this because I thought about what I meant about good design is simple. Like, you know, what I think I have to write an essay about this one day, but Karl Popper had this idea about science that you're only making a scientific statement if you're saying something falsifiable, right? And I think there's probably a similar version about criticism, like criticism of art or literature or something like that, which I can't even say the word criticism without my stomach turning, right? But I think criticism is only means anything if someone doing the thing would change what they were doing based on what you say, right? That's sort of like the test for a statement being scientific. It's scientific if it's falsifiable. It's criticism if it might actually affect the behavior of someone doing the thing that you're criticizing.
So
right?
I'm not sure. Well, do I want to go down the criticism path? But I want to clarify this.
Okay, so this is the sense.
Because for me, criticism is.
No. Here's a version of the statement about things being simple that meets that criterion, right?
Okay.
Like this thing about things being simple. How? So, okay, you know, you hand this essay to somebody who's trying to make things, and he says, "Okay, good design is simple. Now, what does that actually mean I should do? Like designing Corinthian columns, does that mean I should take them out, right, and replace them with Doric? So, okay, so I'll be more precise. I've noticed when I'm making things, all kinds of different things, writing, painting, and hacking, that there's this thing that in hacking they call refactoring, right, where you end up. The first round is often just gross, right? You try and produce something that has all these false trails built into it and ends up being horribly baroque, right? And then you can go back and almost always take stuff out and thereby improve stuff. Okay, so that's what I mean about good design being simple. What I mean is good designers go back and take stuff out and the result is better.
So Elmore Leonard wrote a couple of years ago something, you know, the great mystery tough guy author, wrote how to write good, something like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says is that go through and take out anything that sounds like writing. Yeah, actually good advice, but then I thought about it and said, take this with everything else that he says, and what he's actually teaching you is how to write well like him. he's describing his style. He's a wonderful stylist.
A lot of good writers have said the same thing, though.
Yeah,
There's that famous remark.
but not all of them. So his idea
Didn't have
of
time
what's
to write the short one, so I wrote the long one.
Yeah, or Samuel Johnson saying, when you come through your writing and you find a phrase you particularly like, cross it out. Right? Or kill your darlings, right?
Yes, and all of this is along the lines that good writing does not obtrude itself.
Yeah.
Right? But that is one type of good writing. There's good writing that leaps
That
into your
obtrudes
face.
itself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Only as this sort of practical joke.
You not at all. You realize it's just like holding a hammer. This is the Heidegger, right? So it's just like holding a hammer. So that generally a hammer that's a good hammer is one that's well balanced. It's not wobbly. It does the job well. You don't even notice it. Right? That's a good hammer. But the thing that Heidegger doesn't say that I think he should is that there are times when a hammer is just so damn good.
You mean Karl Popper?
No, I mean Martin Heidegger.
But no one mentioned Heidegger yet.
I threw him in because I'm stealing his idea.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought maybe it was just understood for meetings here.
Right. The famous Nazi philosopher Martin Heidegger, well, he was famous and Nazi. Not much I can do about that. So, good hammer is like good writing. It's not in your face. You're not aware of it, and the better balance it. But there's also the experience of using a hammer or reading prose or poetry that's so good. It feels so good in your hand that you say, holy cow, this is a great hammer. I love that phrase. Wow, that phrase just popped into my face off the page. That's great writing. That's a good type of writing, too.
No,
So,
I would guess when a phrase pops into your face, what it is a good idea.
Actually, no.
Just imagine if
I don't
someone
think so at all.
expressed an idea that was inane in a beautiful way. Do you think you'd enjoy that?
Yes, absolutely I would. Just like I enjoy the phrase, I can get it wrong, it's a Bushism. It's the quiet, the soft bigotry of low expectations. A phrase that almost means something, but is a beautiful phrase.
In the right
I'm in
context.
awe of the guy who wrote it for him.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure I could think of something much more inane than
But
that.
Paul, I absolutely reject the idea that the only time that one notices good writing is when the idea is good. I really, really disagree with that. So grant me that. Just say there's a difference between us. Okay? I do occasionally like writing that I become aware of because of the felicity of
All
the
right.
expression.
There's
So,
incantations.
but here's what I'm trying to get
I
to.
agree. There's incantations and stuff like that. And sometimes writings are something of incantations.
I want to get to this
Like
point.
Lewis Carroll.
Let me get to the point, and then we'll get, because that's not what I'm thinking of at all.
Ah.
So if you grant me this, which
Okay,
you're not
yeah,
really,
go
you're
ahead.
reappropriating it into you. But if you grant it to me, then that means that there is a style there's a type of beauty, an aesthetic quality, let's call it beauty for the moment, that is true of art, in this case literature, that is not true of makers' art. That is good design. I'm happy. I'm not a designer. I'm not a maker. So I'm happy to acknowledge that good design doesn't have these little bumps in it where you notice what's going on, that's a bad thing. You want to take out everything that makes the experience, makes you more aware of the experience of what you're doing. Good design will be as efficient as...
I didn't say that.
Okay, well, so correct that part of it. What I'm trying to get to is this overall point, and then I'm pretty much done, actually.
Okay, no, go ahead.
Which is-
Overall point. Overall.
It seems to me the thing that you are calling beauty, which is recognized by taste, which isn't simply subjective, all of which I agree with,
Okay.
that this thing that is beauty is different in stuff that's made and designed than it is in the category of art. Because I can, empirically for me,
Art's not made and designed?
that's why I try to separate it as, yes, it is. It's a category of things that are made and designed. So that category of art, literature, the plastic arts, etc., dance, that there are moments of beauty in there which are not simple, that that are beautiful because they're not simple, which are noticeable,
Or beautiful.
that,
All right.
that get in the way, and that's beauty as well.
You mean there are sometimes
But
things
that
that are
is not-
wonderfully unnecessary?
And that's not true of the sorts of made things, design things.
You mean
that
like
you're talking
hammers?
about. Like software.
I don't think there's any difference between any kind of made thing. I was thinking about this on the
Really?
way here. Yeah. Like, there's this...
Then I don't know why simplicity is a design principle for you. Because clearly, to me, in the world of art, there are times when complexity is joyous.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So why would it then be a design? So it's not a design principle in all of the arts, but it is a design principle in software and other such crafts.
Even in software, there might be cases where you might want to amuse somebody with something unnecessarily complicated, right? Like, I saw your cursor had a wagging tail. I wouldn't particularly like that. It's unnecessary and possibly amusing. It's at least someone trying to do that. Yeah, sure. I don't think, I should write something about this one day too. I don't actually think
list
there's
is getting longer.
any
Happy to
difference
do that.
between, the list is already infinite. I don't think there's any difference between this, when people are asking like, okay, yes, but is it art? There's no stuff that's like, some things are art and some things aren't art, you know? You have art, there's like a continuum, right? There's your coffee cup that has this hideous, you know, mass-produced flower printed on it, right? And you work your way up through like graphic design and illustration and stuff like that to the most famous paintings in art museum. It's all just a gradual continuum. I mean, the question, there's not some stuff that's art and some stuff that's not art. There's some stuff that's good and some stuff that's not good, right? You could make a one-off oil painting
But that
in a
doesn't mean there's a
studio
single
with,
criterion for all things that are good in that sense.
well, everything can be pleasing the way you think, like, okay, sculptures or something like that can be wonderfully unnecessary, but a hammer can't. And I say even a hammer can have bits that are wonderfully unnecessary.
Oh, I know. I totally. It's your design principle, not mine. I totally. I
All
want
right, so in
filigree
general,
on my hammer. You know, I want filigree on. You know.
all right, okay.
Everywhere. I like
so
filigree.
everything can have
Yeah.
things that are wonderfully unnecessary, and also in everything, including the most frivolous end or unnecessary end, it turns out to work well to go back and throw things away and burn to. That's what I mean.
So let's say it's a ballet, and it's a moment at which.
I'm not saying you want to throw away everything complicated. Just, you can always find you can throw stuff away and it makes things better.
But that's
Almost always.
But that's not a principle of simplicity. I mean, the thing that I'm struggling with is because I want to believe in the unity of all of the makers. There's something wonderful about that vision. It's a very Greek
Wonderfully
vision.
unnecessary.
And very simple. Yeah. But I worry that that what you're finding in common only looks like it's in common. That the simplicity of, I hate to keep, you know, it's not my favorite piece of art, but you know, the simplicity of the unnecessary. Well, it's engraved.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as it could be. It's a hand.
No, I never said things have
But
to
it
be
doesn't
as
have to be as
simple as
simple
they
as-
could be. But you can often take stuff out and it's good.
What would you take out that would make this better?
I didn't say this isn't a version 1.
Okay.
Seriously.
So what makes this good is exactly the unnecessary complication.
I would take out the antennas. Do you see those?
Yeah. Well, that's why I have Photoshop. What makes this good, I think, is in fact the excess. And oddly, here's what I think is an odd example. This thing, which I sort of like. I don't know in 100 years they're going to like it, but I sort of like this. And the elements are all really simple, but the way they're connected is complex. And if you straighten this out, it would just not be even interesting, much less good.
Sure.
So it's not the simplicity of it; it's the opposite of the simplicity.
Well,
It's
there's other things on the list here. Simplicity was just the first one.
except it runs all the way through, and it's not just
This
the first
is-
one. It's actually crucial.
There's a lot about that building that's actually very simple.
Oh, absolutely.
All the windows are the same. For
The
example.
pieces are absolutely simple, and then the construction of the layout of the pieces is, is bizarre.
You know what's weird about
Cartoon
this
thing.
building? This building would compress really well as AutoCAD, right? What's weird about it is the deviations, the things that are hard to compress, are not where you expect them to be, like whether the walls are vertical, right?
And it's the stuff that's hard to compress that makes this interesting, that makes this good. I think in your sense of good.
Well, there's certainly a point at which that's true, because the thing that compresses best is a point. Right? The thing that
But
compresses
points don't
best is
compress
like
at all.
living in a right. That's what I
Oh, okay.
mean. That's uncompressible. So sure, yeah, living in a raw box would be the simplest possible thing.
Okay,
But
so
not
there you
very
have it.
cheery.
Paul Graham's.
I didn't say that. There's other things on the list.
Okay, so it seemed to me in reading, and maybe it's just me reacting to it, that it was simplicity that was the closest that we got to what's at the bottom.
No, it's just the closest to the beginning of the essay.
It runs throughout. So, okay,
Yeah.
so
No. There's this whole section where it says good design is funny.
yes, I know.
I mean, and I talk about the Dürer's engravings. I was thinking that is the counterexample you should have chosen, not Bronzino, because
why?
I'll
I
squish
actually
you over
almost
that.
took it
Dürer engravings are really full of. They would really compress badly, whereas Bronzino, on the whole,
you could do the pattern,
painted
you could do
things
the
as
textures.
simply as he possibly could, given the circumstances. That thing you had up there, that's a court portrait, right? There was a convention. That would have been a much harder example. But this is about as few bits as you could possibly use for doing the commission that he was made to execute. And if you look at those faces close up, I mean, they're almost cartoons. They're so simplified, you know. He was almost notorious for simplifying things. But this is one of those portraits from the era of like Queen Elizabeth with the big ruff and stuff like that. This was a certain kind of commission where you had to show the court dress, and he showed it like, I mean, he had to reproduce it, right? But he reproduced it as simply as he could.
So let me just ask one other
And look at the
sort of thread.
background.
No, that's true. You know, as opposed to
Yeah, right. Look at the difference. And that is, Michelangelo made fun of that kind of painting. He said it was designed to trick the eye and to please women.
the short version of evolution. No. So let me try one more thread and then open it up, which
Okay.
is the metaphysical thread.
Oh God.
That's okay. I just wanted to make it sound better than it is. The question is, let's say you're absolutely right in every detail.
Wow.
We don't have
all
to
right.
go that far, but yeah, every detail. Why is it?
First,
What-
Rumsfeld resigns, and now I'm absolutely right in every detail. This is a
Back it up.
perfect day. It can't get any better than this.
Yeah, wait for Virginia, exactly. So the Greeks would have liked your essay a great deal, which is a recommendation, right? I mean, our knowledge of the world and the order of the world and beauty are all the same thing. Cosmos means the whole shooting match. It means beauty and order, and it is that way, and it's unthinkable because there couldn't be knowledge
I'm
if the
not
world
saying
wasn't ordered.
that.
All these. So, you seem to be saying that there is this alignment between the stuff in the category of art that we normally put in the category of art, and
Hammers.
hammers and software and
Yeah.
the Chrysler Building and the stuff that we make with our hands. Not that we don't make art with our hands. Anyway, so I want to know. I know why the Greeks thought that. The Greeks thought that too, and I sort of know why they did. I mean, have some sense of it, but I don't know why. Underneath it, you think this. Why did this happen? Is it a coincidence, or? Well, surely it's not a coincidence. So, why is it that there is this correspondence, this alignment of values across everything that we make?
I don't know. Maybe that's something that there isn't an answer to. Maybe we just use the word beauty for things that are good, you know. Or no, actually, I could see why there might be, like the simplicity part, for example. I think, like, a simple program is good. I know why that's true, right?
Well, okay, so
It's less likely to be concealing bugs, right? Simple often just shows you.
it's likely to use up less CPU time too.
Well, no, actually, quite the opposite.
Damn. Oh,
When
'cause
you
you're doing
optimize a
recursive
program,
thing,
you
okay.
generally make it longer.
Okay.
The shortest possible program is usually done at the expense of efficiency. Uses up least memory, so it does use up
there we
the
go.
least of something.
Some resource.
Simple programs are usually terribly inefficient, though. In fact, when I write programs, I usually write simple and terribly inefficient ones. No, but like I was thinking, for example, three-legged stools, right? I have a three-legged stool sitting next to my computer, and I feel like even space aliens would realize that three-legged stools were a good idea, right? Whatever weird world they live in, things with four legs are more likely to be unbalanced than things with three legs, right? So that is as close as you get to like eternal verities. I think there's actually several levels, several different kinds of ways there can be things that are sort of absolutely good or bad, right? There's like things that even space aliens would get, right? Like I think space aliens, if they have math, probably also prefer shorter proofs, right? And they probably, if they want a stable thing, they give it 3 legs instead of 4. It would be hard to imagine things being otherwise, right? And then there's stuff that applies to all humans. So for example, all humans find faces very interesting, right? Robert just had a baby, and he said that she noticed faces before she noticed objects, right? Like humans are really wired to notice faces. So anything with faces is going to be pretty gripping. So there's stuff that even space aliens would get, and then there's stuff that all humans would get at any time, and then there's stuff that, all your peers would get, and then stuff only you would get, right? You're a very private person.
So you can articulate why simplicity, and yes, we're stuck on that, I'm sorry, but why simplicity is, you can argue for why simplicity is a good thing in programs, although it does seem to have this negative thing you got to deal with of being efficient. But
yeah,
we know why that's good for something that's designed for utility, like a program. So why is it also good in stuff that isn't particularly designed for utility, but is designed for, for lack of a better word, for an aesthetic experience? It's an artwork, it's a painting, it's a ballet. Why would it be the case that simplicity works there too?
Well, one thing that you get with simplicity is visual punchiness, people call it. You will notice billboards look like the Bronzino, not like that, right? If you want to really whack people and get their attention, make a few bold objects, make the edges sharp instead of fuzzy or jagged, right? This is the kind of stuff they teach you in graphic design classes.
And is that lizard brain stuff? Is just we're wired to?
Yeah, I think it's lizard. I think that would apply to aliens too, probably.
As long as they were
aliens would probably have something like vision, right? And that would probably work on them too. Just guessing here.
So we have to wait for the aliens to resolve this. So, okay, so I just one more question along this line. So, there's
you have plenty of time.
No,
you only started at 7:10.
No, I'm going by clock time.
Okay,
if you know what I mean. Not really. So, the aesthetic simplicity works there because it has visual punch, although sometimes also ornateness does as well. You see this in music as well. I mean, Philip Glass.
Yeah.
And as opposed to just lush 19th century romantic music, which is not very glassy. Are you right that so I guess it's a two-part question. Are you right? Are you confident that in the aesthetic realm simplicity is not a fashion? A, and B, if it isn't, if it is the eternal verity, then I guess I'm still not sure why if it's the same value going across both realms.
Well, I would guess that this idea that in version 2 you can always throw stuff away and it ends up being better. Yes, I would guess even space aliens, when they refactor their programs, they find that's true.
How about when they refactor their ballets?
Well, I bet you. Certainly in painting, you throw stuff away and make things better. And I mean, when I said visual punch was one of the advantages of simplicity, I didn't mean that was the only one. You just asked me this stuff and I have to make stuff up. And that was the first thing I thought of. But, I mean, there are others, right? I mean,
why writing is better than talking.
Another reason that simplicity might be good in painting is because it's a good sign. Because if it's simple, what that means is you understand what you're doing. You sort of understand what you're seeing, and you've gotten to the essence of it, right? That's certainly true with writing. Like when you read the papers written by undergraduates, it's just this huge, hairy mass of words that don't really get anywhere, And if you write simply, I mean, I write like brutally simple sentences that often offend people because they understand what I'm saying, right? That's a lot of the reason I offend people so much is they understand what I'm saying, Whereas, like, academic papers, they're often like...
Yeah, but your essays, their brilliance is in part due to your, beyond the simple sentences put together that lead you places that you have no idea you're going to end up. So.
Right. But the thing is, like, simplicity, when you get to simplicity, what that means is you're no longer trying to save yourself by throwing up this fog cloud to protect you, right? And so in that case, simplicity isn't in itself a virtue. It's sort of a sign that you got the right answer.
You've also written really, really well, and to me, in an enlightening way about the experience of seeing as part of the heart of painting as well. It's a matter of learning, as many have said also, that it's and there's a certain element of simplicity there.
Yeah.
Of simplifying.
Like Morandi. Morandi sort of paints the essences of things. The still life painter.
Morandi.
Yeah.
Never heard of him.
Morandi. Oh, well, he's famous. When he died, his paintings were on the cover of Time magazine.
Oh, damn. How did I not know? Anyway, I won't do a Google search for Morandi while we're online.
Why
Okay.
not? What could be more Berkman?
So, I'm done. What do you think?
David, would you be satisfied if Paul simply replaced use of the word simplicity with refinement?
I would
And-
suggest the word personal.
No,
And maybe
because it doesn't tell us enough about what they have in common. To refine, you can refine sugar, you can refine
Wait a minute,
artwork,
this
you
is
can
my
refine
essay. I don't want to
software,
use the word refinement.
but it's not the same process. So it
I'm
doesn't-
already in enough trouble for using the word taste.
I got a problem with taste.
I'll throw out the word parsimony.
Parsimony. I like simple. It's so much simpler. By the way, this essay is actually, this is actually overdone simplicity. I went back and rewrote this so much and took out so much because I was afraid I would get in trouble for talking about taste, and I thought I really better be careful what I say, you know. And no one's gonna be able to stand reading about this. I mean, even I like using the word taste, you know. But I thought no one would be able to stand reading about this, and I really could not have an unnecessary word here. And so this is actually kind of harsh. It's sort of like the bare metal, you know. It's too simple. It sounds like Wittgenstein or something. Not quite
Yeah,
that
that
bad, but like sort of a bunch of numbered theorems.
It actually, I didn't think it looked like that at all, but I
Well,
understand
not
what
that
you're saying.
bad, not nearly
But
that bad.
it actually was a really nice piece of writing.
Yeah.
Not that that's
It doesn't flow nicely. That's the thing. If things are if you leave a little fat in, it flows better.
So
It's like batter. You know, when you're mixing it in the beginning, you don't have enough liquid in it. It sort of cakes.
David, can I interrupt with a question? I was just wondering, what is the essay? I didn't do my homework.
The
And,
essay. It's this
why
thing
did you
called
write
Taste
it?
for Makers. Right here. You can have this copy.
it's
if
also
you want.
available online.
That's where I got it.
Why did you write the essay?
Because I was tired of people writing that taste was subjective. People who talk about that idea always express it that way, as if the word subjective meant anything. And I thought this idea. I wanted to just say this, the idea that had no name.
Which idea has a name?
Oh, there's this phrase, the love that has no name. So I figured there was
There's not
probably a
speak its
bunch of, right, okay, that's right, sorry,
Shay's right.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
The idea that dares not speak its name. So I thought there were probably a bunch of other people out there who probably secretly believed
So
also.
I actually sort of.
Or maybe we're latently inclined to believe in taste, and if I wrote this, they'd think, hey, that's right, I believe in taste too.
Well,
Yeah.
so here's a question, right? So when I read old books or watch old TV, even the best of that, sometimes it seems really boring compared to the best TV and books of today, right?
Yeah.
Some people would say that's just tastes have changed.
Yeah.
Would you say we're getting better at making art?
No. I think that's because fashion changes.
So
I
that's
noticed
fashion.
that too.
That's not.
I noticed,
taste.
like, I've been watching old Dick Van Dyke shows, for example. And the jokes that get the biggest laughs in this, from 1962, I think they started. And the jokes that get the biggest laughs, I don't even understand, because they were topical jokes. They were inside jokes, right? You know? Or open up a random high school yearbook, from those kind of high school yearbooks from, like, you know, where people get to add content, as it's called, where people get to put in their own stuff, and they make little references to stuff, and you can't understand any of it, and it seems as boring as anything could possibly be. I'd rather read a brick wall, right? But it's fascinating to them. There's nothing so interesting as topical, dated stuff. That's why it's hard to write jokes that last for a long time. You know?
So it's fashion, not
The
taste.
funniest jokes are inside jokes.
Okay.
No one is ever so laughing, like breaking their sides laughing, as a bunch of high school kids laughing about something that they laugh about every day.
So
Like imitating their teacher. It never gets old.
So why do you think you can look at this?
Whereas to find something written in an ancient Greek play that's so funny, that's pretty hard.
But doesn't that mean that you cannot look at old art and understand what's being seen there?
I probably don't like it as much as they did, right?
And so, but your assumption
Because I
is
look
that
at it and think
the part that you don't like that they did is merely fashion, and the part that you still like because this is 400 years old, 300 years old, is the stuff that is really
600
valuable.
years old, closer to 6.
So
14,
your
20?
assumption is the stuff that you respond to either positively or negatively is the real stuff.
Well, it's longer lasting stuff.
No, it's just older stuff. So
Well, it's stuff
we-
that
we don't-
aliens would be more likely to get, right? There's parts of that painting that space
yeah,
aliens
but
would
which
like.
is to say that
Parts that I like and parts that Van Eyck's contemporaries liked, right? So they loved the religious aspect
Yeah,
of it,
absolutely.
whereas that's all lost on me. And they thought, oh, there's the Holy Mother, right? What
I've
could be
never
more
seen
exciting?
You know, no images except what's been painted. So what that
Yeah.
to me means is this isn't.
Whereas I think, wow, he did a pretty good job on that guy's nose. You know, what could be more grossly secular?
So this means that what you're calling taste is. I think the conclusion is that it's situated. It's situated in one's time, one's culture, one's language. It's not purely subjective. Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's good, and we go our ways. We can't say anything more about it because you can point stuff out. You did in the Bronzino, right? You point out. We all learned how to look at this a little bit better because you actually know about this stuff. Right? Nevertheless, we can't see this the way that they did. Thus, taste is situated in time and context. It's not. That's why. So I'm not tempted to look for the eternal
more
verities,
like
I don't think there are.
More like there's a certain amount of error induced by the local magnetic field. And when you're far away from it, you have less error in your instruments.
So here's the difference.
Like
You think the UFO guy, that is the alien who comes down, what she sees is some type of guide, because that's trans-species even. Whereas to me, the moment
I'd rather make stuff
What
that impressed
what-
aliens than just impress my next door neighbor.
I
Yeah,
see.
definitely. If I could make stuff that would impress space aliens, I would be very pleased. If I have to choose between them, and you do have to choose between them, I mean, there is an industry, an enormously profitable industry devoted to the thing that you're calling taste. The part that's situated, it's called the fashion industry, right?
No, it's not simply. You have taste and fashion. I think that there are other terms that there's styles, there's context. So fashion is.
There's some stuff that lasts and some stuff that doesn't
Fashion-
last, right?
yes,
The stuff that
but
doesn't last is called fashion.
No,
It's pretty much
that's
identical.
not the case. There's other stuff in addition. Fashion generally, as I understand the term in ordinary language, is reserved for the things that come in and out of style based on no particular value. Short skirts, long skirts. There's no aesthetic difference. Long hair, short hair. There's nothing real there. Fashion is an evaluative term that's used for that class of stuff, but not everything.
All right, I'm using
that
the
we
word
now
fashion
like
in a
and don't
broader
like.
way.
The fact that you can help me see what's there, to me, indicates that, in fact, this isn't, we're not talking just about fashion.
Okay, all right. I'm deliberately using fashion in an overly broad way in order to draw contempt on things that don't last.
So I
I'm
think
saying basically that religion was just fashion, which is the kind of thing that really gets me in trouble.
we are
And I don't actually
absolutely-
say that in essays.
Okay. This actually was really helpful for me because now I understand. I'm really moved by that which is situated in the context, my own, or insofar as I can learn somebody else's, like previous times. That to me is where the beauty is. Where you're finding it in the substrate, that's eternal.
The stuff that's long lasting and that
I guess we just have to agree to disagree. It's a matter of
Well,
taste.
I found it pays. You can sort of learn to separate the two, right? You can learn to get better at recognizing and subtracting out fashion. And I have found that's actually kind of the secret to making good stuff. And I mean fashion in this deliberately
Can you
overbroad
give us
sense.
an example?
Well,
that's a really interesting comment.
For example, hair in paintings. One of the hair changes. Hair is like this fluffy thing on your top that changes more quickly than stuff lower down. Like shoes change the least, and then pants, and then shirts, and then hair changes like crazy.
So
Right?
it's like
So
south to north.
if you want to look at a painting, if you want to date a painting, like in the sense of identify its date, not have a relationship with it. If you want to date a painting, if it's a recent one, you can just look at the hair and you can get it within like 5 years. I mean, not this, you know. I mean, I don't, because not that they didn't change the hair fashions every 5 years, but I just don't know what they were,
Yeah.
right? But when you see a painting of somebody from the 80s, whoa, man, it's so obviously from the 80s, right? And so if you've figured that out, if you've figured out that hair just like moves, oscillates wildly and shoes don't, then you want to paint, and you want to paint paintings that don't depend. Okay, so if you paint hair that looks fashionable, your painting will look really good now to people for a meretricious reason that will evaporate, right? Like those jokes on the Dick Van Dyke Show that got huge laughs then, and I don't understand now, because they were cheap shots. They were cheap inside jokes, right? And painting stuff that's fashionable is a cheap inside joke. Well, cheap inside reference, right? That will get you extra points, and you will depend on them. It's like leaning on a crutch that you don't know is there, right? And then in the future, the crutch will disappear, and your reputation will fall over because the stuff you were making wasn't as good as you thought. You know, you were making stuff look cool, right? Instead of making stuff that looks eternal. So
no mullets. You will not paint mullets.
yeah. Well, mullets aren't in fashion anymore, David.
I'm long past the mullet day. So.
Is complexity the opposite of simplicity?
Usually it's considered to be. That's how people use the word.
Well, of the various arts that you mentioned, it seems to me what's interesting about classical music is that from, let's say, Baroque to late Romantic, there's been more and more complexity literally every year.
You know, I don't know anything about music, so I shouldn't talk about it. Before I talk, I should read a book.
I have a question about this sort of axis, I guess, of on the one side you've got this kind of universal aesthetics where I guess the aliens would understand it, and then on the opposite side you've got fashion, which fluctuates like crazy. Maybe club kids in New York City have this fashion that fluctuates.
The other
week
extreme
by
is
week.
like the fashion among your immediate friends.
Right, some very
Nano
specific, I guess in a very small group then.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, I don't know if this makes any sense, that these kind of universal fashions, or, well, maybe not fashion is the right word for that, these universal aesthetic touchstones are more mathematical, like you described the three-legged stool as being essentially a really good design because it doesn't bump like a
Well,
four-legged
mathematics
one
you
might.
could define as being the things that space aliens would agree with you about.
Yeah, I think you can
Actually.
agree on theorems, or something like the Salk Institute in California is very symmetrical and looks out, and you have this mirror symmetry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something very mathematical about that, and very minimal that kind of expresses the mathematics in something concrete and physical. I don't know, that's kind of a random.
No, that
Walk
seems
through
absolutely true. It's true. It's if you're looking for examples of what to impress space aliens with, it's always easiest to find them in stuff that's mathematical. But like the fact that sharp-edged, simple things would probably get their attention. Like billboards would probably work on them too if they had any kind of vision. You know, they're not just math. Like,
Speaking of math, I'm actually from math background. So if we define like beauty as sort of maximum positive association, which means in this picture it associates me with positive things. If we put a trash can in this picture, I probably won't be that satisfied with this picture. So if we define that way, would we define simplicity as the maximum or the most effective way to sort of achieve most common kind of positive associations? And the fashion could be defined as sort of within a sort of time frame, this common association would be, achieved. But after that, it could be,
Yeah, that
change.
actually seems reasonable. Bad example about the trash can, because you could probably paint a trash can in a way, like a trash can painted by a good painter would look a lot better than a beautiful person painted by a bad painter.
Right.
But
It just
yeah, that
popped
seems
up
right.
from my head. So
It doesn't get through the
Fashion's the
fashion
diff.
thing.
Fashion's what you would get by diffing.
Just want to ask about something can be simple and something can be trivial. So you read a proof and you may think, oh, this proof is simple, and you read another proof and that proof is trivial, and you can look at a design and say this design is trivial. So how can
Well, I
you
think
tell
what
the
people mean by trivial is when you do something simple, it doesn't do very much, right? When we talk about doing something simple, it's sort of understood. Like it doesn't mean like using a small amount of ingredients to not do much. It means using a small amount of ingredients to do a lot, right?
But oftentimes hard to tell because like there's no one using it yet. Say you have an idea,
Yeah.
and it could sound simple or it could sound trivial. There's no way
Something
to
like
tell.
e to the pi plus 1 equals 0 is simple, but incredibly mind-blowingly not trivial. Like, it's really deep and interesting and ties together so much math, but it's simple at the same time. So
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah, but for some people that's trivial.
Well, it
Basically,
requires you
mathematicians
to
always
have
say, "Oh, but
imaginary
that's
numbers.
trivial."
It's not that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an honor to meet you. I have used your book, NC Common Lisp, and I know on the cover you have a painting of yours.
Yeah.
And reaching towards an apple. I think.
How did you know that was mine?
I took a class and that was the required text, so Paul Graham was
No, I mean the painting.
you know Chris Thorpe?
Oh,
He was my TF for that class.
I see.
I think it's also in the front page.
No, it isn't.
So,
I forgot to mention that.
oh,
If it were anybody else, they would have busted me to like put in the credits, right? Because they're very paranoid about that. But
sure.
no one reminded me. But go ahead. What about it?
Oh, well, I was just curious, like, of your decision-making process for choosing to put that painting on the cover of the list.
It was the best painting I had made up to that point.
Like, that book is going to be useful, for a long time. Do you think that painting's going to sell your book for a long time?
I don't think that has sold one copy.
Yeah. But in that particular painting, like...
No, I mean the book has sold one copy. I mean, I don't think the painting.
I'm
the painting
curious to see the book now because I don't know what the
Yeah.
cover looks like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
You probably won't buy the book though. It's like $60 now. It's shocking. I wouldn't buy the book just
a
to
lot
get
of
that
computer
painting.
science students probably would. Professors, man.
Yeah, I chose it just because, it was the least painful to look at, and I knew I was going to be seeing a lot of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty painting, but...
It's a weird experiment. The way it's just like a still life with a bit of a person in it, and that was an experiment. The way artists paint still lives and the way they paint people is actually fundamentally different usually, because people won't sit still for very long, whereas stuff will. And so the way you paint still lives, the way most people paint still lives, is you have the painting here and the stuff there, and you look at the stuff and you look at the painting, and when there's a difference between them, you change the painting, right? So you can go pixel by pixel practically and just get it till you really nail it, right? And you just cannot do that with painting, with people, because people have to get up and have breaks, and when they sit down, they're not in the same place. And so the way they teach you to paint people, I'm just talking about the standard way they teach painting, right? But the way they teach you to paint people is to have a model in your head of what sort of a generic person looks like, and then modify it based on the person you're looking at. So you sort of learn to paint a sort of standard person, and then you say, oh, this person actually has a longer nose and her eyes are closer together, and has hair that sort of looks that general way. But you can never paint the individual hairs, because when they get up, they go like this, and when they sit down again, their hair is in a completely different place. So the most you can do is sort of suggest the differences between this sort of generic person and the particular one there. You never get to paint someone's nose the way you paint an apple. So I thought I would put a bit of a person in a still life that was actually painted like a still life, and I made little marks where the fingers had to go, and she had to put her hand down in exactly the same place every time, and I painted the damn thing like a still life.
I'm having trouble getting larger.
I just wanted to see what would happen. I don't think it would work for a whole person. It's like still life with two objects, one of which is human.
No, it would have been a lot better if you'd unfolded the sheet and made just sort of this, it would compress better too. If it's a white field.
And simplicity is not the only thing.
Suggest that you're after purity of thought. Like, to me, what beauty is an artifact of a realized purity of thought. And when you're not
Purity of thought means you understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
you understand what you're talking about, and that is an artifact of that.
Well, I mentioned that as an example of why simplicity in painting might be good, because it meant what you're. Yeah, that's another. That's totally different Paul Graham.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a photographer. He takes all these pictures of club kids. I mean, I hope people don't think
I have another question. So I'm curious, and this is sort of a big problem that like YouTube and Google Video are having right now, sort of indexing, live video or video, like being able to make it searchable and stuff. Like I want that picture, I want that scene from Reservoir Dogs where the guy's getting his ear cut off or something like that.
Yeah.
Like how do you index that and stuff like that? I know Lisp is like really good AI programming language and stuff. Like arguably, maybe not. Well, anyway, regardless, I was curious if you had any thoughts of like a way to solve that problem, and also the second question is
how to index video.
yeah, like is there some sort of way?
Purity of thought. I'll just hook you guys up. One can solve the other's problem.
Is there a way to have like a robot, an AI software that can sort of read video, and also along with this discussion of aesthetics and beauty, like
Maybe.
interpret beauty according to some algorithm?
I saw a presentation by a PhD student from Mass who had an approach to this video indexing problem, and they would take each image and they would distill it into very small chunks, and so no chunks of the frame.
Really?
So
Square bitmap.
So one of the examples they had was the tiger lying in the grass. So their algorithm would pick apart the grass and then the tiger and then the stripes. And so you could compare small chunks much better with other pictures. So if you search for grass and you index that piece of grass, then you could find other pictures that have grass in them based on color and other simple attributes. So
Wouldn't get you what he wants. Though. He wants to see from the Reservoir Dogs.
I'm just saying that this is an approach to indexing images, not
I think maybe we should resolve this problem
One's cut the other.
offline, or actually online. But we're offline now when you come right down to it.
I think the essence is to take something complex and boil it down into very small pieces. That's the idea of that approach.
Computer vision does a lot of that stuff, like shock diagrams and so forth and so on, trying to figure out the essentials of a shape. But I mean, it's again offline.
So about the whole like beauty and simplicity thing, I mean, I think biologists, evolutionary psychologists talk about this a lot. Like there are a lot of things that we like that are good fitness indicators. And for something to qualify as a fitness indicator, it has to be a trapdoor function of a sort, where basically
What function?
trapdoor function.
Trapdoor.
Yeah. So in encryption, you have the trapdoor operation where the multiplication of two big primes is easy, but the factoring is hard.
Yeah.
So going one way is easy, while going the other way is hard. So then I would suggest that something beautiful would be something for which excellence is easy to recognize, but difficult to come up with. For example, when you're painting that piece of crumpled cloth, beside the apple, it's easy for someone to look at it and go, oh, that looks like real cloth, as opposed to paint something that looks like that. Whereas a flat piece of cloth would be both easy to recognize and easy to reproduce, and so would not satisfy that criteria. But all kinds of other things, are sort of the same way. And then the satisfying space aliens aspect, that's just overfitting. I mean, you when you think of a space alien, you're factoring out everything in your environment that you would think of as a local aberration of time or space.
I don't think it is easy to recognize good stuff. if it were, people who made good stuff would be famous, and people who made crap would not be able to get away with it. But that does not seem to be the
crap
case.
has other virtues.
But you already said it's easier over time.
Yes,
But
it does get easier.
Which
over time.
still would not be the case that anything that was hard to produce, easy to recognize but hard to produce would constitute beauty, because we can make up arbitrary examples. In fact, the internet's full of arbitrary examples of things that are hard to produce, from carved pencils, but easy to recognize as being at least interesting. So the beauty part of it would have to be in addition to. There's some set of stuff. Would there be design principles? If you're right, would there then be possible design principles to?
It can't be easy to recognize, or fashion wouldn't exist, right?
But
and fashion's enormously more important for most people.
So this is another difference.
it's
Fashion
easy to
serves a
recognize
different
what
role than beauty does.
Fashion is about
Fashion is the error in beauty.
No, it's a different thing. I mean, I watch crap TV because I don't confuse it with beauty. It's crap, but it's enjoyable. It allows for some social bonding. It means I can talk about
If you
Project
watch
Runway with
50-year-old
friends.
crap TV, you won't find it
But
entertaining.
no, but Stephen Johnson has an answer to that, an explanation of it. He's done the in some cases, he's done a quantifiable analysis of the complexity of TV shows over time. He's graphed the number of characters, the number of lines. This is in Everything Bad is Good for You.
What's that got to do with it?
It explains why we can't watch earlier TV.
Probably not the only reason.
No, of course not. And part of it is that we've lost the context. We don't get some of the jokes.
Well, some of it was like the old Dick Van Dyke Show episodes are pretty great. Like, a lot of it still works, right? And you go and look at other stuff from similar times, and boy, it's all just cheap inside jokes, and it totally falls flat. I mean, it's painful, right? So the crap TV that you watch now, that you like, you only like it because it's crap TV from the present or the
Yes,
recent
of course.
past.
I'm not buying the DVD box set of Project Runway and expecting to be looking at it in 50 years. But the reason why the crap of it is appealing to me for different reasons than Shakespeare is, and I recognize that difference. So it's not
That
like
difference
fashion
is what
is
I mean
degraded
by
beauty.
fashion.
Fashion has other appeals. It's not degraded beauty. It has a different social function. It makes me feel different than beauty does. It's so I guess I don't see the continuum.
See, the thing
for
is,
it.
if you make stuff, you have to get better. You have to kind of train yourself not to be tricked by fashion, right? Because like if you've been painting stuff for 10 years, that's long enough for fashions to change. And if you paint something that worked, like to have this phenomenon of looking at old crap TV and thinking it wasn't funny, and you think, damn, I'm not going to be burned by that again, right? Suppose at some point there was some fashion for painting everything with lots of expressionistic paint splashed all over the place, right? And stuff like that looked exciting because of its novelty, and so you got duped into splashing around a little paint a little too gratuitously, right? And 10 years later you look at it and think, oh my God, it's like looking at an old photograph of yourself with a mullet. And you think, damn, I'm not going to do that again. I mean, after you've been burned by fashion, after you've lived for a while and been burned by fashion, you decide to avoid it entirely. Like, seek it out and try and avoid it.
Well, it's like there's two different ways of working, like for instance, like hip hop goes out of style like within 6 months. A new song comes out or whatever, and they're sampling, they're mixing and matching things that they find out in the world. But then other artists work from the inside and try to get down to basics. Like a Thoreau or something, locks himself up in a room or a house out in Concord or whatever, and writes all about nature, things that are like archetypical or everybody knows.
So I have a question.
Let's see if there's other people, like in the back. Sorry.
This is maybe a small jump, but relating to this question of how you judge what's good, I'm curious what you've thought of lately that you judge as good. What new ideas you have that are sort of percolating, new essays that you're thinking about, or something that occurred to you and you said, oh, that's pretty good.
I had one. I actually had one while we were, after today, I think, as a result of interviewing all the people for Y Combinator. We always get these groups. Okay, so here's the idea. This, I think, is an idea that good design is not a feature of something, it's a measure of its success. And so what I mean by this is there's like a certain number of mistakes that people always make when they're proposing startup ideas. And one of them is to say, well, there are all these other people doing X or Y or Z, and we're going to do that, except we're going to do it with good design, so it'll be easy to use, right? In fact, it wasn't that ease of use. Ease of use is not a feature. It's a measure of how well you've succeeded. And so we're always getting these people who say, like, I'm going to make a blank, whatever it is, but that's going to be really easy to use because the existing ones are hard to use. Well, ease of use is not easy, right? It's not because the people who made the existing crappy ones that are hard to use didn't think about it. It's because they suck, right? And so what you're claiming, if you say, I'm going to make an X, but I'm going to make it easy to use, it's like saying, everybody else writes these novels, and almost all of them are lousy. Well, I'm going to write a novel that's really interesting. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, that's what writing a novel well is. It's like saying, I'm going to do it well, So my answer to that is show me a demo, and then I'll believe it. Right?
But you funded a startup that made front-end design interfaces to databases easy.
Wufoo.
Yes. Isn't that contrary to what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying. I mean, believe me, I would love to fund people who actually were gonna do X and make it easy.
Oh,
I love that. Okay. What I don't believe, nobody can come in and say, this is our special sauce. Our special sauce is we're gonna add ease of use, right? It's like someone saying, I'm gonna be a novelist, and my special trick is my novels are gonna be really interesting. That's like or I'm gonna run the 100 meters, but I'm gonna run it faster than the other people. I mean, that's a tautology almost. You're just saying, I'm gonna solve the problem well, But Wufoo actually does make it interesting. Easy. Like Wufoo is a database program where the word database never appears. You don't know you're using a database. You think you're like making web forms, right? Those guys are good designers.
How do you spell? I'm sorry, I should know. How do you spell Wufoo?
Well, that is why their name sucks. Because this conversation has to occur. I never liked their name. WUFOO.
Maybe consistent.
If startups really want to do something, I let them. But
the word mean
this is the
anything?
proof. It comes from the Wu-Tang Clan and the Foo Fighters.
No fashion here.
Is Web 2.0 a fashion?
Yeah, yes. Well, the name Web 2.0 is a fashion.
This website, you say this is a
Um, well,
Where's the Ajax?
it's
there a Google
definitely
map?
fashionable. It's definitely fashionable, but it will look a lot better than some other fashionable sites. Like, it doesn't say beta. Right? That's one of the first things we do to people. We strip off all the betas. It's understood that it's a beta. So let's see, which parts of it are dated? Like, which parts of this will you look at in, 2020 and say, oh my God, that's so 2006.
Oh, all of them. Button designs, color
No,
choice.
not all of it. See, there's some things that might be good looking. I mean, go back to the front page. It's interesting. It's a good exercise to try and do this and pick out the stuff that's actually good. So do they have any drop shadows? So those things that jump up, like when you put your finger over Wufoo, that's bad.
Yeah, you think it's gonna be like blinking text?
The way it gets bold and yellow, that's too much, right? It's like, hey, we got JavaScript. Look, we changed stuff on the page. I mean, I hope they don't see this. The guy will kill me. Kevin Hale is their designer, and as designers go, he's really good. But it's impossible to completely escape your time.
Do you want to completely escape your time?
Well, it depends. I think to the extent you're trying to do something timeless and great, like math, yes, you want to escape your time, right?
That's a mistake that
But the beauty of a web page, though, is you can change it every day.
If you're making shirts, if you want to make any money, no, you do not want to escape your time, right? So to the extent, if you're trying to make money and you're dealing with stupid people, cater to fashion, right? If you're trying to make something that people will be fabulously impressed with in 1,000 years, don't.
What about names?
Your pitch go with the PCs.
we say one thing to the startups and tell them to say another thing to the VCs, basically. I mean, VCs do not like to believe this or do not like to hear this, but pitching to VCs is an art. You know, I actually was talking to a VC recently, and I made the mistake. He was talking about some startup he wasn't interested in, and I made the mistake of saying, "Oh yeah, those are terrible presenters." You know, he said, "Well, I'm not influenced by presentation."
Yeah, right.
Not exactly.
I have a reasoning machine.
VCs are very influenced by presentation, and a lot of what we do, people really have no idea what Y Combinator does, but a lot of what we do is sort of train people to pitch.
I have a question about venture capital. Have you ever thought of venture capital for fine arts?
Yes, actually.
What have you thought
Venture
about that?
capital for fine arts. Actually, one of my 1001 ideas I never did was to fund young painters, sort of like we do with Y Combinator. I think I wrote to somebody at RISD about it, and like some part of their own nest of bureaucrats, and it got put in an inbox somewhere, I'm sure, and no one ever wrote back to me. But yeah, I did think about it.
How would you choose a good candidate to receive venture capital?
Probably a lot like the way you would choose a startup, actually. People who seem enthusiastic and not full of shit, and have a good demo.
But would potential market value come into play?
No. Good God.
Shouldn't the market
In
value
human
art?
lifetimes, the price of art is dominated by the component of fashion. Absolutely.
But
You could not make money speculating on art.
And the
'Cause
art.
you're guessing what fashions are going to be, and you can't do that.
Sure, but art collectors do it all the time. You know, the collection.
No, some art collectors make money, and some art collectors don't. But that doesn't mean that there are people who are like professional speculators in art who make money.
Sure, and it's a difficult problem. But how? And would that come into play at all? Like
What? Trying to make money from it?
No. Well, I'm not making money now. But thinking about.
No, if I
How
were
much
to
is it
fund
worth
artists, it would be purely like as a philanthropic thing,
But how would you define?
or a hack maybe.
And how would you measure how it's going to contribute to society? Right? Like, is it going to
Well,
further?
no,
your
I
own
wouldn't.
political
I would just try and
cause?
find people who did good stuff.
And how do you define good? Does it promote like
I know when I
the
say
Green
it.
Party, or does it promote eating right, or does it promote?
No. I just mean like people who are good at painting, not like people who cause people to become vegetarians or something like that. Just plain old people
So
who are
just
good
like
at painting.
going back to this original aesthetic question.
I'm not saying that funding painting would somehow fix all the world's problems. Just
No,
in
I'm
my
not saying
opinion,
that
it would
either. I'm
fix-
just saying, art has a number of functions in society. You know, aside from just having a pure aesthetic value.
Yeah.
There's also a social value, a political value.
Yeah, the only one I care about is the aesthetic value. For art, anyway.
If I can go off point for just 1 second, what's happening with ARC?
Oh, God.
We were all thinking
Well, really? Well, what's happening with ARC is we worked on it all summer.
back up.
ARC is a programming language.
Is it beautiful?
Well, parts that aren't beautiful I can fix, which is more than I can say for other programming languages.
So there's a
I
program.
mean, it's more beautiful in Scheme. And I know because the current version is written as a giant macro that macro expands into Scheme code. And so some of it is written in Scheme. And when I have to switch to writing in Scheme, it's like, switching to a monitor this size or something. It's horribly painful. And Scheme is considered to be a reasonably clean language, so I presume ARC must be better. And it's not like I have some bias against Scheme. I've written an enormous amount of code in Scheme. My dissertation is all in Scheme, or T. So I think it's nicer than Scheme, yeah. And what we're doing, actually, is we're making a new website for Y Combinator that's not just a bunch of static pages. It's gonna be something you can actually log into and do stuff.
We'll have a mashup with Google Maps.
No, there's no current plan for that.
So
Is it on Rails?
Man,
It's
you're just
ARC.
not- you're out of
It's
fashion.
ARC.
So ARC is built out of Scheme.
It's
Would you
a-
say ARC is simpler than Scheme?
Programs are shorter. A lot less parentheses.
The ARC programs are shorter.
Oh,
but they
yeah.
macro expand into bigger Scheme programs.
No, even in some cases, the same program will, there's like for example, cond, The reason cond is in Lisp, all right, we're getting a little technical here, right? But you did write a book on Lisp, whereas I wrote a book, on Lisp. The only reason cond has all those parentheses in it, I mean, if you could turn if into cond if you just made it if x then y else if x then y, right? You could just take out all those extra pairs of parentheses. The only reason they're there is because McCarthy didn't have prog n in the 1960 paper, and so he needed cond to have implicit prog n in it for his examples to work. And ever since, people have been using this hideous operator with these completely unnecessary sets of parentheses around each test action pair, you know, just because there was no prog n in McCarthy's 1960 paper.
I sense there's interest in the status of ARC, how far along it is.
Right.
Well, I'm using it. Well, I mean, we're going to release this. I mean, we're going to release programs that are written in it before we release it.
Who is we?
Me and Robert Morris.
I guess related to that, I remember reading in one of your essays, I don't remember which one, you said that creating a new language, it works better when there's a big project
Yes,
that you want
yes,
to do
and that's
in
the
it.
project.
So the project for ARC is the
Is
Y
this new
Combinator
website
site?
for Y Combinator.
Oh, okay, cool.
The last project, this is what happened to ARC, was the last project I wrote was a mail reader. And for this mail reader, I thought, oh, I'm getting a lot of spam. I get like 20 spams a day. I'll write a spam filter, right? Well, this little spam filter I wrote ended up being a huge distraction. And for like a whole year, I ended up working on spam filters instead of ARC. So
God bless you for it.
Well,
for a year or so.
I think CRM 114 still works. I think the very best Bayesian spam filters still work. Although I am starting to think I'm going to have to actually fetch the page on the end of the URL now and start using the terms there.
You've certainly inspired, the Bayesian stuff you did has certainly inspired a whole new class of spam. So
that's for sure.
That exists only to get around your filter.
Well, I mean, that was a long time ago. Now it's all kinds of everybody's filters.
So in case you don't know, if you're using a spam filter that works, it's very likely it was inspired by a plan for spam Paul's article.
That, you see that? That is Yahoo bureaucracy. All that pad crap. We had this, Yahoo had this. My site is made with Yahoo Store. All this pad stuff, if you've ever wondered about this, it's inane corporate policy. Yahoo, those are alt tags on on spacer images. And Yahoo had this like usability policy for blind people that you had to have alt tags on all your images, including the spacers. So that's why all those pads, if you've ever wondered about it.
That's more or less hilarious.
Yep.
Across the floor.
So Pat, not beautiful.
That's actually
Or you're on the Windows screen.
Don't have it installed.
God, I can't get that out. I can't get that out until I finally write a new web-based site builder for my own use.
So I'm going to bring it to a close.
Okay.
So, but let me just point out that we have gone from, because we've gone from there's been history in art, and then prog n, the history of the cond. That's quite a range.
Oh yeah. So what I was saying is all the unnecessary parentheses in cond are gone, and there's no cond because it becomes if, right? If and cond are the same thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a copy I printed out.